I wanted to talk with you about all of the things that Europeans get wrong about Asia. Now, I'm European and specifically Italian, and obviously I'm going to generalize a lot. Europeans don't really exist in a sense. There is a ton of countries and in Europe, and the same applies to Asia. There is no a single Asia. So again, I'm going to be generalizing a lot, but the only reason I do that is because as a European living in Asia, I'm aware of the fact that there is a ton of stereotypes. So here is the biggest misconceptions that Europeans have about Asia. The first one would be that Asia is developing. Now, what I mean with that, or rather, let me translate that for you, that Asia is poor. Asia is poorer than Europe, and Europeans are much richer. And when they come to Asia, they can, just enjoy because, well, they have the spending power. Now, why do I say that that's a misconception? So, I think it goes without saying, but in Asia, you have some of the richest places in the world. I could name Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and many many other. Obviously, you also have some places which are indeed developing and where the average income, annual income, may not be as high as European countries. But again, not every single place in Europe is rich. Not everyone in Europe is full of cash, right? So that's, I think, a huge simplification and just an outright misconception of how Asia is. A second misconception that I always hear, I always see, is that Asia, it's China. So a lot of Europeans just associate China with Asia and Asia with China. Now again, there is so much more to Asia, right? Namely, obviously for me living in Singapore, Southeast Asia, which is a huge melting pot of cultures, countries, religions, right? So to a European, an Asian is probably someone that looks like a Chinese, right? And again, how does a Chinese look like? That's for a different video. But anyways, so that would be a huge misconception. Yeah, and I would say this just comes from the fact that the vast majority of Asian tourists in Europe would stem from China or Japan. Japanese tourists used to be all the rich, even when I was growing up, so I'm talking 20 plus years back. Now it's not the case. The vast majority of tourists are actually from mainland China. Bon, so that's a huge, other misconception, I would say. There is another equally important, if not more important, misconception that Europeans have about Asia, and that is that Asians are just waiting for Europe, for the West, to come save them. For whatever reason, Europeans think that they have kind of figured out how to live best, how to manage, countries, societies, etc. best, and think that everyone wants the same, which again is just a symptom of ignorance. Just people who don't realize that in different cultures, different places, with different mindsets, people may not necessarily want to live in the same way as people do back in Europe, right? So I would say it's this idea that what applies to you applies to everyone else, which I would say couldn't be further from the truth. So these are the biggest misconceptions and stereotypes that as a European I'm quite familiar with and living in Asia, that people think as Europeans when they approach this huge continent and extremely diverse continent. What are some other misconceptions from your experience? Let me know.